forward.
Okay, so thanks for everybody joining us. As Michael said, we've been doing this call now for a little bit. We had previously done one-on-ones, which had not been nearly as productive as these group calls are, because the ability to have diverse groups of people, whether it's geographically, culturally, experience-wise, it's led to some really constructive dialogue in regards to the brand. So I enjoy doing these calls every week, and I hope that it provides some insight to the brand and what we're trying to do and how we got here. Typically, I do a brief overview of this. I'll go through it quicker than normal, so we can get to Q&A, because we have quite a few people on the call, and I do have a hard stop at 11. So just real quick, my educational background is in finance. I started at retail banking, TD Bank, moved to brokerage, TD Ameritrade, moved to asset management, Merrill Lynch, and then I was at T. Rowe Price for my last job before getting into this business. And so I was fairly invested in my career in finance. I had several securities licenses, 66, 63, 7 in insurance, annuities, things of that nature. And, I had gone through the ladder of the different types of portions of banking and finance. And I kept wondering why I never felt this fulfillment that I had been searching for. And I thought to myself, I had always been entrepreneurial. I had done side businesses in the past. And I was like, maybe if I have a legitimate, real brick and mortar business, that will scratch my entrepreneurial itch, and I'll be able to kind of just move on and not have that wandering eye in my cubicle that I seem to always have. And so I really did enjoy my job at T. Rowe. It was probably, very, very good organization, and a really nice job, really well-paying job. But after opening that first store in Harrisburg, I jumped into it. It really only took about 6 months to jump into it head on and full time. And so, as I was sitting at my desk at T. Rowe thinking about what kind of businesses we could do, I had wanted to look at what I thought to be manager-centric, non-skilled businesses, meaning that if the manager called off, that the store wouldn't have to shut down for the day. The example that I've given is always the pizza shop. If you have a pizza maker and you only have one pizza maker and only one person can make pizza, and that's your core product, then and that if he calls out, gets sick, gets COVID, gets whatever, then all of a sudden you have to either step in yourself or close down. And so at the time, I had no thoughts of leaving my job at T. Rowe Price. So I started looking at different businesses, and I kept coming back to the quick lube business, which I view as a quasi-utility, because every car on the road that's not a Tesla needs an oil change and a fluid exchange of some sort. And it's a regular reoccurring business. And I also thought there was some major gaps in the service being provided to the consumer. And I do believe that most great businesses are built from filling a void in the consumer space. So I took over a quick lube in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. While at my desk at T. Rowe, at the time, Yelp was still relevant. Fortunately, these days it's not, at least not in our space. I don't know if anyone on the call is in the restaurant business, because I know the relationship between Yelp and the restaurant business is an interesting one. But I sat at my desk and I went through some of my competitors' Yelp reviews, and I just wanted to reverse engineer what exactly the problem in our business was. And I thought there was a couple things going on. I thought there was a credibility issue. I thought there was a service issue, and I thought there was a pricing issue. And I said to myself, if I can resolve these three things on the consumer side, I'll have a nice business. And so at the time, Facebook dark posts were not utilized by any of our competitors. So on the backs of Google AdWords and Facebook dark posts, I launched Harrisburg, and then we launched a second store to kind of validate the model. And then we did a third store in Chicago, which really emphasized the absentee nature of the business. I was there quite a lot that first 12 months. I was flying in on Spirit Airlines. At the time, they had a thing called $9 Fare Club. I was able to go to Chicago for round trip around $25-$30 depending on the dates. And so I did get out there quite a bit in the beginning, but you know, it really early on in the business ingrained in the DNA the need to have processes, the need to use third-party apps, the need to use different procedures for managing the business from afar. And so at the time, I had just watched the movie The Founder, which kind of chronologues Ray Kroc taking over the McDonald's franchise and spreading it. And I thought to myself, if this guy can open 1,000 McDonald's in 1950 without Facebook and texting and Zoom and things like that, there's really no reason that I can't run a business in Chicago at the time it was 2016, from Baltimore, you know, with the technology that I have. And so that was kind of how I forced myself into it. And so we utilized a lot of different resources to manage that store, and it's been a really good store. And I've been able to do it from 800 miles away. So from there, we went to store 4, which was in Pittsburgh, store 5, which is in Youngstown, which is a town in Ohio that is on the border of Western PA, about 40 minutes away from Pittsburgh. And then from there, we kept adding on stores, just using the same model, rinse and repeat, kind of make it a little bit better each time. When we got to store 10, I stopped, we never stopped thinking of the consumer. We're a very consumer-driven business, but we shifted the focus from the consumer to the operator. I found a lot of success in facilities that others had failed, and I wanted to find out what those reasons were for why I was having success and some operators weren't. And other times they were, you know, established players like Jiffy Lube or Valvoline or Mobile One Express Lube or Castrol. And so I started shifting my focus to how to create this to be a more operator-friendly business. When franchise fees are incredibly high, when the cost to get open is incredibly high, it discourages more local attention, and it kind of relegates the operators to private equity, family offices, and other large entities that really view the oil change business as a portfolio play. A lot of these guys will open up 10 stores, and really they only need 2 to outperform to pay for the whole portfolio. And that's not the best way to give the consumer a product or service that is best for them, because at that point you're going to cater to the stores that make the whole portfolio make sense. Excuse me. And so I looked at a couple of things, the biggest thing being the facility itself. The facility for some of our competitors can be upwards of, you know, $1, $2, $3 million to build. And when you have a mortgage or a rent that is that high, it puts you in a position where you have to drive gross revenue. And that's how you see Jiffy Lube moving into more of a multi-care, all of the above approach. I don't think that is the right direction for our industry. And I do think that the consumer wants a no-frills oil change. And I do believe that the model that will be left behind when electric vehicles penetrate the market further and further will be the oil change only market. When you get into a position where you are doing all of the above, then you kind of start having an identity crisis, in the sense that what differentiates you from the dozens of other brands like Meineke, Midas, Monroe, Pep Boys that do all of the above as well. And then when you get into that position, you have to basically get into a race to the bottom on pricing, and no one really wins that battle. So we can command a premium for our services as an oil change only business, because at the end of the day, we're selling people their time back. That's kind of the focus of our advertising and our marketing, is that we are a convenience play. And we believe at a very macro level that that's the core belief of our consumer base, is that they want a no frills oil change where it's the least impactful on their day possible. So we created a building plan that essentially cut that cost into a quarter. Our buildings are very streamlined. We created a staffing model that is a fraction of what some of the competitors are. And we've also streamlined how many SKUs that we carry and what services we provide. And that essentially allows us to be specific to the oil change only without having to worry about making enough revenue to pay the bills, pay more skilled labor. If you're doing tires and brakes, you're not, you're going to have to pay a little bit more because that is a higher liability service than an oil change. Excuse me. And the on the hierarchy of automotive, oil changes, lube technicians are basically the second lowest rung, right above detailers. So as far as labor costs go, we're in a good position where if we don't have to have the highest skilled labor, then the costs can be capped to an extent. And so that's the model that we've driven home. I teamed up with Devco because they've had a lot of people that have had experience in scaling automotive brands to national presence, and they've been in the franchising space such a long time. They've dealt with emerging brands, established brands, and one of the things I kind of pride myself on is putting people around me that fill the gaps that I have, because I'm pretty self-aware of my shortcomings, and so it's important to have people that complement those places that need to be worked on. So we've teamed up. We've had a lot of success in getting the brand out there. The ability for Michael and Chris and the Devco team to tell our story and what we're trying to achieve. They're very good stewards of our brand, and it's been great working with them because they see what we're trying to do, and it allows them to articulate what we're doing really, really well. And so I'm going to go ahead and stop talking about the business, even though I could go on and on about it because it's like a third child to me. But I think Q&A will be the best way to serve everybody on the call.
Okay. Well, Costa, thank you. And yes, I've certainly had my personal experiences with oil changes, and so it wasn't hard for me to grasp onto what you were doing. So thank you. Let's start off, Paul. I see you on the call. Let's move across my screen here from left to right. Do you have a question for Costa? Good morning, by the way. Welcome from California.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I also have a 3-year-old and apologize for my voice because he also brought a bug home the other day. So my apologies for my raspiness also. My question is, Nathan and I, we're on the West Coast here, and I guess, the barrier to entry for us is, finding out, location-wise. We all know how California is incredibly stringent on the environment, and for us is to understand how to get into the market, and for it not to take 3 years getting EPA tests and results. So that's kind of our main kind of concern, and wanted to know whether you had any insights into that.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So the due diligence that I've done on California has brought us to essentially come to a place where, one, our tanks have to be specific to California in terms of the earthquakes. There's a term for it. It's escaping me right now, but our tanks have to have some kind of resistance to that. We do provide, we try to get ahead of as many of these EPA issues as possible. So we provide our franchisees an SPCC, which is a spill prevention, containment, and countermeasure book. Typically, you would go out to an environmental consultant and have one of these drawn up for anywhere from $15,000 to $100,000+ specific to your state. We have one that we provide, and then it can have an addendum that's specific to your state. And then when it came to our building, we wanted to have as much of the variables controlled as possible. So our building has a snow load as if it were in Maine. It has a wind load as if it were in Seattle. It has Chicago rather, and then a rain and pitch to it as if it were in Seattle. So we've tried to cover as much of that as possible so that when we do go in to have these permitting discussions with local municipalities, we've checked off as many of the boxes as possible. Unlike the traditional model, all our petroleum products are above grade, which is a huge distinction. A lot of these local officials don't understand the difference between a below grade and below ground tank. Typically, when you're talking about below ground, you're discussing tanks that are buried. Whereas in the quick lube space, traditionally your tanks are below grade, but they're above ground. And there are some officials that will give you grief about it, not knowing that there's actually a distinction there. So we've tried to tackle as many of these things as possible so that when we do get into the conversations about the permitting, we have answers for anything that comes our way. On our website, costaoils.com, at the very bottom, we have our statement on used oil, which is the only hazardous material that we produce at our sites because we don't do anything with coolant or any antifreeze or any chemicals that would have a hazardous classification. For California, though, we registered in California. We see a lot of opportunity there. There's the car culture in California, despite how quickly electric vehicles are penetrating and some of the narrative that some of the elected officials are talking about in California. The car culture is so huge there, and car trends typically start in California. And so the number of registered vehicles in California, even families that have Teslas, most of them have 2 other cars that have combustion engines, regardless of having a Tesla. So there's a lot of oil changes that still need to be done for the next 50 years in that state. And so there's opportunity there. And so for new construction, we're gonna, as an emerging brand, we're gonna cross a lot of bridges together. We have a franchisee in Sacramento. We have a franchisee outside of Los Angeles. And so we will be figuring out a lot of this as we have these conversations with local officials. But there's also opportunities there for conversions as well. Conversions are kind of less talked about, but in a conversion, it's the path of least resistance, because getting a C of O, which is a certificate of occupancy, is a lot easier because things get grandfathered in. So that's kind of a real long-winded answer on your question, Paul. Hopefully I answered it.
Got it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Costa. Yeah, and the conversions sometimes can be faster and also a little more economical. Nathan, I see you up next. Do you have a question for Costa?
Hey guys, thank you. Yeah, I think really just to piggyback on Paul, him and I are partners, and the additional thing I think, and Michael and us have had this conversation, and we're digging in further into it. It's just into real estate selection, and again, the nuances of California. I actually come from upstate New York and very familiar with just the abundance of land and sort of ability to potentially locate an area and how different that is here, but also the opportunity where you look at some of the great retail centers, and if you can secure a out parcel location, how advantageous that is. And just wondering, again, maybe some more nuances of how you're thinking of really dense urban areas and site selection, relative to sort of vacant land builds.
Yeah. So one of the premises behind the design of our building was to be able to get into those shopping centers. We don't want to get into a battle with the Chick-fil-A's and the Dutch Bros of the world, because they pay extremely high amounts for ground leases. But because of the queuing in their business, the lines just are so long that they've gone from battling for half-acre lots to now needing full-acre lots. Our 1-bay building is only 400 square feet. Our 2-bay is only 840 square feet. So we really want to approach these landlords and assure them that by letting us onto their property, they're not going to lose out on their Dutch Bros or their Chick-fil-A or their Chipotle or their Dunkin' Donuts. And so that's the angle we take from that perspective. Fortunately, because of the success we've had in selling franchises, we've caught the attention of a lot of big vendors in the space. And we've recently signed a master broker program with a company called Morro Hill. Morro Hill is one of the foremost named master brokers in the franchising game. They have strategic partnerships with a lot of developers, and they're going to be able to get us in the door with some of these landlords and also understand the nuance of what we're trying to do, which is kind of the key here. Because if people think we're just another kiosk style business. And over the last year, there's been a lot of moves to creating kiosk versions of, any major brand you can think of. Chipotle just launched a kiosk version of their brand about a month ago, and Dunkin' Donuts has had one for a while. Starbucks has had one for a little bit now, but Raising Cane's, Church's Chicken, they've all created kiosk versions of their businesses as well, but they still need about a half acre. So we don't want to get into fights for that kind of land, and Morrow Hill is going to help us. But to be very, very clear on the real estate, that is the most heavy lifting on the franchisee side. That is the responsibility of the franchisee. And although we do sign off on it and we have the final approval, how quickly you get from LOI to lease is largely, or from being onboarded to LOI rather, not even to the lease, is largely determined by the participation of the franchisee. So we have people in our program that, are perfectly content with the master broker doing the legwork. And if it takes, 5-6 months, they're moving at that pace. And then we have people that join our system and they're driving around in their free time and they're taking down the names of the signs they see in the different parking lots, and then they pass that information into the CRM system that our master broker uses, and having a lot more success a lot faster and getting leases signed. And then from getting lease signed to permitting, we have a really good program when it comes to that. I didn't mention this in the beginning of the call, but we do hold a discovery day every month, and that's where we go into the real weeds of the business. I try not to get into too much specifics on this call because that's what the discovery days are for. So if we can keep the questions to as macro as possible, that would be great. But yeah, that should shed a little light on that.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Costa. Wesley, it looks like your name is coming up next. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Do you have a question for Costa? Okay. Let me move on. I don't know who this is. It's a phone number. It's 281-520-6919.
Could be Brian. Brian, do you have any questions for Costa?
No.
I think he's
Okay.
having issues. He's joining from his phone. I don't know if he can hear
Okay.
us or not, but I'll text him.
All right. I'll just check again with Wesley. Wesley, if you're back on, do you have a question for Costa? Okay. I guess we've got 4 more minutes, Costa, if we can keep you on the phone.
Yep.
Paul or Nathan, any other questions? I know we're going to have a conversation next week, a deeper dive into the real estate piece. Anything else though about the concept?
I think, yeah, I really think that's probably the next big thing for us to dive into. But
Okay.
we think it's really cool what's been built, and we're just excited to keep digging in further.
Great. Okay. Well, I think it looks like that's everyone, and we thank you for joining us. And Chris, you're on the call. Anything Kristen, you may want to add before we end it?
Brian said that he was trying to talk. I guess we couldn't hear him. I don't know if he can try again, Brian, but we couldn't hear anything on our side.
Go ahead, Brian.
He doesn't have a microphone next to his icon on the participants, so I don't know if that means
Okay.
he has no audio on his end.
All right. We'll probably have to do it via email. Okay. Costa, thank you. Have a good day. Hope you feel better. And Paul, the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Yeah. If anyone has any additional questions, Michael, Chris, and Kristen can pass on my email, and I'll certainly get back written answers to anything.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Costa.
All right. Yep. Bye.
Thank you for your time, guys. Thank you.
Yep. Bye.